Hello, everybody, and welcome, welcome, welcome to our program, Conscious Accra, the first African chapter of Conscious Cities. We are looking today at Accra and its urban heritage through the personal life and works of one very important Ghanaian and Accra resident, Efua Theodora Sutherland. My name is Abena Busia. I'm the current Ghanaian ambassador to Brazil, but more important for this program, I'm one of Efua Theodora Sutherland's literary daughters, whose life and works have inspired my own life and works. She was a mentor to me. She was also an aunt by marriage. And I'm also friends to her children and grandchildren who are here with me today to share their ideas and memories of their mother and grandmother's work. Conscious Accra, as we said, is part of a Conscious Cities group of programs. Accra's the first African chapter, but this is the last program of a series that has been put together to spark intergenerational and interdisciplinary conversations about how we shape our cities, how our cities shape us, and where in the light of that, we feel the responsibility to move things forward. So this final webinar highlights specific heritage of Efua Theodora Sutherland. I love saying her name. And as I said, we are here with her children and two of her grandchildren. So we're going to, with her own words and talking about her legacy, discussing really 3 generations of interaction with the city of Accra. So before I continue, I'd like to ask each of the people present to do a brief introduction to who they are and just to touch on their relationship with Efua Sutherland. What are you all doing now? And what aspect of your work is most closely related to the legacy we are discussing? You know, in the course of the program, we'll hear more. So this is just the highlights. Where do you fit generationally? And where do you think her vision fits with where you are now? I'll begin with Sister Essie.
So,
the firstborn.
hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Efua Sutherland's first child, and I have been an academic working in the Institute of African Studies, where she worked in the University of Ghana. I am also I also belong to a number of organizations that are associated with her. So I'm the chairperson of Afram Publications, which she initiated. I'm the chairperson of the Mmofra Foundation. Mmofra, we'll talk about it later, but which is an idea she brought to bear in terms of her Pan-Africanist orientation. And I am also a member of the board of Mmofra Foundation, which is the non-governmental organization that she established. So that's the sort of work that I do, both in terms of my day job and in terms of my civil society preoccupations.
Thank you. Now we will move to the one son, Ralph.
My name is Ralph. I'm a second born and an architect by profession. we did grow up in a home with a lot of architecture and tree planting and agricultural inputs. So they naturally played out in my life from early childhood to this very day. I really enjoy, if I had to come back a second time, if such were possible, I'd still be an architect.
That's wonderful. All right, now, Sister Amawi, the person who's managed to bring us all together with Rachel. So Amawi, the last born of the three.
Thank you. So my name is Amawi Sutherland Phillips, and I have had careers in law and in academia. During my first career as a lawyer, I was particularly interested in women and children. And I worked with the National Commission on Children at the time when Efua Sutherland was chair of that organization. I currently work as an adjunct professor in the United States, and more particularly related to this webinar, I am a board member and the international representative of Mmofra Foundation, which is the social enterprise that Efua Sutherland started, as AC said. And I've played a leadership role in many of the initiatives of Mmofra Foundation, from concept to practice.
Wonderful. And now, Rachel, who's been playing a leadership role with you on this particular program, please let us know who you are.
Thank you so much, Auntie Abi. I am Rachel Phillips. I am Amawi's daughter and Efua Sutherland's granddaughter. And Nana, which is what we called her, is something of a mythical, a legendary figure for me, because my memories of her are from early childhood, of playing in her home and running around in the courtyard and on the Arabamansa grounds and eating from her plate at dinner time. And so much of the extraordinary work that she did is not something that I discovered until later in my childhood, my teenage years, and now my adulthood, and even today. In this conversation, I'm really excited to continue learning about her extraordinary legacy. But one of the ways it has impacted me is in my passion for urban development, for regenerative, inclusive, culturally informed design. And as one manifestation of that, I've spent the past decade heavily involved as a volunteer with Mmofra Foundation's Playtime in Africa initiative.
Wonderful. Thank you. And now, lastly, Elizabeth. Please.
Hi. I'm Elizabeth Sutherland. I also happen to be Efua as well, Efua Janba, and so I belong to this one, grandchild of Efua T. Sutherland. And much like Rachel said, you know, Arabamansa was this kind of magical place growing up. There were books and there were people and there were all sorts of interesting things happening. And but I wasn't either fully aware of her work, the scope of her work and her influence until much later. And now working with Mmofra, with my aunts on various aspects of the legacy, really seeing the extent of her interests. And that's been really interesting because I work in theater and performance. I'm building spaces and making spaces for culture and for children as well. So that's been really, really just wonderful to see, and incredible to see how much somatic memory kind of passes down through that you may not be aware of. And even reflecting with Dad and all his interests in nature and the various aunts and Auntie Amawi and Auntie AC and all the work they've done with heritage and culture and all of that. So excited as well for this.
Thank you. So it's a privilege for me to be with the five of you and to take part in this program. But before we continue, I think I'd like to share just a brief biography of your mother and grandmother so that people understand why we're doing this. So this will be the most formal part of the whole afternoon. Efua Theodora Sutherland is a Ghanaian playwright, director, dramatist, children's author, poet, educationalist, researcher, child advocate, and cultural activist. And she really was all of the above. And I personally would like to add the word mentor for that. She was a pioneer and an influential figure in the development of Ghana's modern literary and theater movements. And as a literature professor, I would like to say, I don't think people in Ghana understand how great her reputation as a playwright is in the rest of Africa and the diaspora, particularly not only because she wrote plays, but more importantly, because of the ideas and the concepts she put behind those plays in trying to think of ways in which contemporary theater could be married to our traditional forms of storytelling and drama. So like many intellectuals and cultural activists of that extraordinary independence generation of the 50s, and in Ghana, we really were very blessed with an extraordinary generation of people. Efua Sutherland saw herself as an African with responsibilities that included representation and the validation of indigenous thoughts, values, knowledge, and the fashioning of new institutions and systems of thought. If I can just say a word, for example, here about my own father, it always strikes me that his books were on chieftaincy, the way in which chieftaincy fits into the modern political systems. He wrote a book on a purposeful education for Africa, Africa's place in democracy. They were a generation of people who thought, we are creating this new national space. How do we do it and hold on to the things we treasure about ourselves? So Efua Sutherland fostered a number of institutions, including ones that were focused on fostering cultural production in Ghana, such as the Ghana Association of Writers, the National Theatre Movement, the National Commission on Children, Children's Parks and Libraries, the W.E.B. Dubois Center for Pan-African Culture, and Panafest, whose full official name is the Pan-African Historical Theatre Festival, as well as the Mmofra Foundation. These organizations and institutions exist to this day, and they all owe their origin wholly or in part to the work, genius, passion, and commitment of Efua Sutherland. So Sutherland's quest to achieve an understanding of the relationship between the arts and African life was reflected in the thing that is the burden of this series of webinars, the built natural and cultural environments of Accra, the city in which she spent most of her personal and professional life. So this is why we're doing this, that these great ideas, this commitment, this passion is actually writ large and still visible in this city, in various places in this city, that, you know, you could do a tourist guide to Efua Sutherland's Accra. These places are still there. So we're going to give you a virtual tourist guide to Efua Sutherland's Accra by showing you various photographs of these places. And then everybody can jump in and speak to contextualizing these places in terms of their importance for civic engagement by speaking to their memories of those images, where they come from and why, and how they are exemplary of this issue of Accra and our consciousness of Accra as a wonderful urban space that reflects the life being lived within it, or that reflects Efua Sutherland's passion to shape for a new generation the nature of the life lived in Accra. So here are the pictures. And actually, I'm going to ask Sister Essie to begin by telling us why we begin with this picture, because something happened when we were all in the green room that I think is important to mention. So Essie, what is this and why?
Well, so Efua Sutherland bought a piece of land in the late 1950s, and she was determined to have her own home, and didn't have all that much money either to do it. But she also had a very, and I think Ralph may have to speak to that, but she had sort of imbibed, the idea of how space is developed and used in African and particularly Ghanaian society. So this was not the first building that was on the site, but the second. And this building was supposed to be her studio, but she was at the same time trying to build the house that we were going to live in. And so we spent some time living in the studio space that, as you can see, has a concept that reverberates in her idea of looking at the Ghanaian, traditional compound, and how you use the courtyard and so on. So we lived in this space until she was able to build her own house. And from what I remember, I mean, we were piled upon each other, but it didn't really matter. It was still a lot of fun to be there. And there was lots of outdoor space to run around in. But let me yield to Ralph and Amawi to see what they remember.
Well, I think the intrigue of intermediate space that a courtyard creates offers something that is really close to the sociology of how we live as people, and the ability to mix from a purely indoor room into an outdoor room and then into the outdoors gives a freedom of living and of relating that characterized our home. Our home, therefore, when we moved from here to the main house, most of our friends remember just how welcoming our home always was to anybody who visited, including having to go into the orchard to pick your own oranges and squeeze your own orange juice.
Yeah.
So for me, I look at this picture and I think, this next one that has just come up, and I think about, well, for one thing, I think about the changing ecology of Accra, which has been dramatic, because in this one compound, you can see how the life and the grounds, Ralph has just talked about the orchard, which was right, it's out of frame, but it would have been to the right of this image, where there were all sorts of citrus trees, and we just had a world, that was full of nature. And later on, I think we'll be able to talk about how that has changed and how we can bring that back.
Yes, Abner, can I add that the plantings, I mean, the trees that you see there remind me of the fact that she spent a lot of time just reclaiming, replanting, reimagining that space. And so, I mean, I don't know whether, Ralph, you'd agree with me, but I mean, I think that at the end of the day, almost every tree that we still continue to have there was planted by her, to get away from all the neem trees and other trees that were there originally, I think.
The big tree that is sort of outside your kitchen patio by the bridge.
Yes.
You cross to go to the, I have a picture of myself in that tree that I'm very proud of. One random time I went to visit your mother, don't ask me why. And I don't know why I'm in that tree, because I never climb trees, but there's a picture of me in that tree, which I now treasure.
I'd like to hear from Elizabeth and Rachel about this idea of having room to run around, because one of the blessings, of our family has been that we were actually able to give our children some of that experience of playing in nature and in a space that was becoming, ever more rare in the city. So do you have memories?
Too many. Elizabeth, there's actually a picture that I would have loved to include in this compilation, and it's a picture of you and our brothers, Kwesi and Daniel, sprinting across that same he is talking about, because we were playing an exuberant game of cards. Please don't ask me why. I'm involved in a half-mile dead sprint across. Oh my gosh, this bridge. But I mean, it was just such a perfect visual encapsulation of what, again, that childhood was like. And the extraordinary contrast, because growing up in Accra in the 1990s, obviously the built environment had really absorbed the Arab Man's space. And so it truly has become this oasis of greenery, this place where large trees still exist in the middle of what is now, quite a dense urban neighborhood. And that contrast was very palpable, even as a child. So we were very grateful to have, the freedom of what felt like this entire, I can't say this entire expanse, this kingdom for exploring, with all of these intriguing old buildings and these trees to climb and forts to build and ponds to fish in. It's really an extraordinary gift to have been given as, yes, a late 90s baby.
Yeah, I have very fond memories the same way, because I was a quiet child. I liked books. I would love to curl up with a book or something, but I think something that Dad passed on to us was planting trees. And so remembering that we all actually had to plant a tree at some point on the property, a lot of which are still there. And learning to care for things, learning to care for even things like the fish in the pond, and respecting things that you caught and letting them go, even though we were quite cruel sometimes to some of the poor creatures. Contrasting that now, because I still, my space is located on a corner of the property with the noise of the road and the rubbish, and that kind of swallowing that Rachel was talking about, of this urban space where people don't have that awareness, and you have people who come and work, and they're talking about cutting trees down in order to have space to work, and you're kind of like, what's the point? But that engendering of nature is something to live in and enjoy and respect. I think really came out from growing up in that space and having access to that space. Absolutely. As a child.
Rachel, before you move on from this picture, I think we have to say before continuing that this building, when it became the writing studio for Efua Sutherland, accommodated, historical figures. I remember at one point Wole Soyinka you know,
Mhm.
was editing Transition magazine out of this space. And there would have been many, many, you know, household names today, you know, who would
Langston
have,
Hughes came over, yeah.
Langston Hughes would have been, you know, been here. Many, many well-known African and Pan-African artists and writers would have passed through this space. So it does have that historical, cultural context.
True,
You know,
and also, Abina, if I could come in, she
yes.
also had traditional groups whom she wanted to record, whose work she was researching or who she was working with, come into that space for the recording. So she would, you know, you would have storytellers and traditional poets and so on coming into that space to be recorded. So you had both the, if you like, the contemporary modern artists, as well as those who came from the roots traditions, all coming through there. Yeah.
No, thank you. You know, because what I was going to say is it's extraordinary listening to the five of you speak. How really important this program is in terms of Accra, because here you have in this one space, as you say, the Pan-Africanist vision of the Langston Hugheses and Wole Soyinkas, the traditional Pan-Ghana vision of who are we and how have we around Ghana told different kinds of stories and done different kind of dance in a space which even to this day, the grandchildren remember as a place to play. And the importance of that vision of nurturing creativity at all levels and all ages and making sure they interact in the same space. I mean, it should not be taken for granted. You know, it's kind of natural to you because it's your home, and natural to those of us who are used to coming in and out of there. But the value of a program like this is to underscore the vigilant intentionality that it takes to keep something that appears so natural, the vigilance and the intentionality. Because, you know, you all could have said, okay, mama's gone, we're going to divide this up into 3 parts. Or, you know, there's a children's park named after her, let the children go play that. But no, you've actually been intentional about trying to keep what Mmofra Foundation means, what creativity means, what playing means. And I just want to underscore that that can't be accidental. It's because it's when we forget that diligence, that when we forget to be vigilant, that things get eroded. So just thank you for that, because things that look simple are actually not simple.
Okay, so this is a picture of the homestead, the house that she built to live in, and again, it combines the idea of the courtyard and the idea of us intentional entrance, that you know you have in especially in northern Ghana. The entrance space is very important, but it also combines that with the idea of her interest in the arts and in this particular form that we have. You find, okay, there are traditional stools there. Stools were very important to her, but also in validating, you know, the indigenous knowledge. This is a form of music that is called nkomo. Nkomo is a word for sharing of deep thought, and many of the songs were very, very deep and songs. And so she had a group come in from, this must have been from the village of Accra, where she eventually did a lot of her research work in storytelling. But so you know, it's an interesting combination of her the way that she thinks about space, but also the way that she thinks about her own traditions and how to incorporate that into contemporary life.
That small building space there with the archway was what we called the little roundhouse. And when you had birthdays, you know, we would make oto, which would be the mashed yam, you know, with palm oil and boiled eggs, sort of symbolic food that would be placed there. And there were always fresh flowers in this home. You know, I remember this, polished wooden floors and fresh flowers. I never, to this day, I cannot bring myself to use artificial flowers because of that memory. And it was just a natural performance space within that compound, that interior compound. I remember Ralph and I had measles at one point in time. And, you know, one of the many well-known performers to come through was the American folk singer Pete Seeger. And Pete Seeger was going to have a performance in Accra. And we were bundled up out of our beds and brought into this courtyard. And he gave us a little private, you know, warm-up performance on his banjo. I don't know if Ralph remembers that, but that was the sort of thing that happened within this space.
Amazing. Pete Seeger even. I'm impressed.
And many others, and many others.
You need to put up a plaque with the names. Just an idea, you know. Oh. Ghana Experimental Theatre. Yes.
That's right. This picture we found in the archives because she mentions it in one of her interviews. This is probably the first actual space that she found on the coast in Accra. You know, I think she must have gone and asked for, it was the Sea Scouts building or something like that. But I think that it belongs in any archive of the history of, you know, Ghana's theater movement.
Yeah, wonderful. Do you know exactly where it is?
Well, it's a bit down from what they call the Baden-Powell Memorial Hall, which is in downtown Accra. Coming towards, you know, the mausoleum and so on along down there. But it's, you know, and the Accra community center, which has now become a car park. I don't want to go there, but I mean so it's in that general area near the Holy Trinity Cathedral.
Yes.
That general area, yes.
Okay. All right. You know me. I'm becoming conscious about things that get lost. I'm becoming a believer in let's put a plaque or a little marker or something to say, you know, the experimental theater was here. You know, just let's affect the landscape. Okay, next wonderful picture. Who's going to go first on this? There's a natural transition from that picture to this one.
Yes, this is a picture of the courtyard of the Ghana Drama Studio, which Ma built with a couple of other people. I think the architect was called Max Gerlach, but there was definitely a fusion of ideas and thought from him, the photographer Willis Bell, and Ma, collaborating to bring in the idea of the natural performance style that we have traditionally. So in the foreground where the picture of Ma is sitting is actually a center stage. And behind it is the entrance to the theater. Opposite it, we as viewers would have been sitting on the more traditional proscenium. And on the side would have been the offices and changing rooms and so on. But just picking up some of these graphic symbols from Northern Ghana, you can just see how it just shouts, this is Ghana. And then the shape of the thing itself is a stool. So you're blending two cultures, societal outlooks. And it was just such a wonderful space, not only for its architecture, but just if you meet people who used to participate in the theater programs and so on that were held there, either as cast or as spectators, it was just an incredibly alive place with such good and lasting memories.
Wonderful. And you know, pointing out the design, of course, it's like, this is 60 years before Jubilee House.
That's right.
I'm just saying.
Let's not go there.
Yes, Abuna, I think maybe Amawi could share, you know, I mean, the way that we went to school, we left her behind. That there was a point at which she was very much involved in the work, you know, and also in observing the work at the drama studio. But I just like to I mean, of course, you see the Kwaba dolls also. The whole idea of what you said at the beginning of this generation of people who were so excited about what the country had to offer, and we're just going, you know, almost gaga over, you know, all the things that they could do, and like, you know, mixing them up. So you had the dance and the music and the theater and every, I mean, it's like a period of a golden period for the arts. And that was, you know, so this is a physical, you know, commemoration of that period. But let me let Amawi say something about just, you know, who you met and who was there and, you know, that sort of thing.
Well, I mean, the fact Ralph has talked about this too, that it was a civic space. You know, the people who were involved in theater were not necessarily theater professionals. You know, they were people from all walks of life, you know, who would come and be part of these productions. And again, you know, the people who produced works there, I mean, Maya Angelou produced, you know, some plays here and was in them. And in her biography, All God's Children Need Traveling Shoes, she talks about, you know, Julian Mayfield bringing her to see Efua Sutherland at a very low point in her life. And it was in this building that happened. I was volunteered into, you know, several of the children's productions, but I loved to sit, you know, our mother would, you know, quietly sit at the back and observe. And, you know, we were always either backstage or, you know, somewhere watching her watch these performances. So it's a very special space. Abina, your point about our commemorating these spaces is so well made. It is now no longer there, and it is the site of the current National Theatre complex. I did not see a commemoration of the Ghana Drama Studio in the current complex. Perhaps it's there, but if it is not, it certainly should be.
To my knowledge, the only commemoration of that relationship is Auntie Ama Ata Edu's outraged poem. So maybe we should take that poem and go place it there as the commemoration. No, I mean, you've given me something to think about. This is certainly, these are the kinds of things that we can try to take on. And it's not only your mother. we had
Absolutely.
a great generation of people who we are responsible to remember, get remembered. And sometimes it can be simple, okay? We don't need to put up 6-foot statues to everybody, but a place marker.
Right.
We can't put a place marker.
Yes, I should say, and Issy will back this up, that the drama studio was in a way recreated on the campus of the University of
That's
Ghana.
true.
And
That's
it
true.
exists there today as the Efua Sutherland Drama Studio. So
Which is true.
Yes.
No,
yes.
that is true. So it's not always that we're unacknowledged, but in a program about urban spaces, you see, it's like archaeology, right? It's just knowing where things were is also part of the story. And we can help create. I mean, look, we are Ghanaians. How many times haven't we, where you're lost though, and you're standing somewhere asking somebody for directions to your best friend's aunt's house. And some people, they will actually look at you and say, oh yes, you know, if you go walk small and pass the place where the kenke seller used to be, you know, she's not there now, but the place is marked because the kenke seller used to be there. And then when you go straight there, you'll find Kojo Mensah's house. It used to be 1 story, but his children have now made it 4 stories, so you can see it. But you know, that's how we still tell stories. And I'm saying, let's just remember where the kenke seller used to be.
Yes.
You know?
Well, it's important, I think, and also it was a nurturing place for just a whole range of artists. So it wasn't just dramatists. So it was painters and musicians and so on and so forth, and who found that to be a home where they could nurture, where they could experiment and so on. And I think also, we made the point, but I think I want to emphasize that you have all the way from completely non-literate in terms of, people, all the way to doctors and professors and so on, working together in that space to create art. And I think that it reminds one of the concept of what this place was supposed to be, which I in reading her work, it looks as if she was interested in creating smallish theater spaces in communities, making this business of creating art a community activity, or recognizing that our communities create art anyway, but then how do you formalize it? And so that was one of the reasons why she herself had, was not very pleased with the idea of having a huge theater and thinking that now you've done theater in Ghana, because she really believed that you could replicate this around the community. So I think I want to say that. We also want to cover the idea that there's this place was also the park for it, was it the Olympics, one of the big football clubs used to play there because there's a much bigger space in front there as well. So just to say, sports, arts, combining with each other in some kind of a synergy.
Yeah, you know what you reminded me of when you were speaking, and it's Toni Morrison in Sula, sort of lamenting the same thing. You remember the opening of Sula? In the space where they tore up the deadly nightshade to put the Meridian City golf course, there was once a neighborhood. That concept of the neighborhood. Yeah. So what is What's the next picture? Rachel. Ah, okay.
We are looking at the Dubois Center.
Essie, perhaps you would speak to that.
Yes. Okay. Well, so this is the home of W.B. Du Bois, who came to live in Ghana and in 1961, I think it was, and then spent the rest of his life. He was basically given a home because he was being hounded because he was a communist or something to that general effect. And of course, he had been this great African-American intellectual. It's great. I'm so excited to see a picture of him with Mama together, because there was, he was adopted by the intellectual and arts community in Ghana. But to go forward very quickly, he was when he died in 1963, he was buried outside the walls of what is called the castle, the Osu Castle, Christian Borg Castle, and it was felt to be a gesture of defiance, if you like, an African American coming to Ghana and being put there in defiance of the whole idea of having been, come from enslaved people and so on. But as things went along, and in the mid 80s, it was felt that that was not necessarily the place. And so there was a group of people, my mother, Dr. Robert, and Doctors Robert and Sarah Lee, and a number of other people who campaigned to have his home turned into a center to commemorate all the wonderful things he had done, and also to make his body, if you like, more accessible, to people who would need who would feel the need to venerate, obviously, his memory and so on. So that campaign went on until the president at the time and the PNDC agreed that and this place should be transformed into a center. And this was led also by this wonderful Dr. Muhammad bin Abdullah, who was he was a mentee. He was also he was just a very conscious kind of person, and at the time was a minister of culture and tourism, and eventually education and culture. So that is what this place is. But the interesting thing about the tomb, of course, and Ralph would probably have to talk about it, was that the whole idea was to do something that was meaningful in terms of where his tomb was going to be. And I happened to be thrust into leading the team that would have the big commemoration for it in 1980. Was it 86? Yeah. So anyway, that's the tomb. Ralph, perhaps you can talk about what you and Niteko were thinking about when you made this.
So I worked on this with two other architects who were brothers, the Evans Amfom brothers. And what we sought to do was to bridge between the life here and the life hereafter. It has big windows, so you can see inside, but it has a moat separating it so that it's not something you just step into casually. And then the white canopy reaching outside kind of gives you a shaded access entrance that makes the approach remember the present and the past together.
Really wonderful. And again, just to underscore, in terms of legacies, how great it is that your mother agitated for the preservation. AC was active in making it happen, and Ralph is involved in creating the monument itself. Again, that collective sense of vision, which is very powerful, very powerful. Do we need to move on to the last picture? Okay, great, thank you.
So perhaps I can speak to this. In the end of the 1970s and early 1980s, Efua Sutherland became chair of Ghana's National Commission on Children. She led, I think, Ghana's delegation to be the first country to actually sign the Declaration of the Rights of the Child as chair of this commission. And her flagship initiative was the Children's Park and Library complexes, which she brought together people from many disciplines to establish. So the National Children's Park in Accra was sort of the largest model, and it is named after her today, which is, you know, something we can talk about later as to whether that naming, you know, is entirely respectful of the vision. But that park and other park models like that in another city, Kumasi, and in other communities were a pioneering initiative that, had we kept up, would have put Ghana well in the forefront of urban park development.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just want to, you mentioned the controversy of the meaning of naming, but I just want to say that for me, certain gestures are important, even if the original vision is not finished. Because, you know, there is a generation of people in Accra who, what they know of Efua Sutherland is that there is a children's park. That's important. It may not be all, it may not be enough, but it's a place to begin. You know, the name Efua Sutherland is not mysterious because that children's park is there. That's important, you know, I think.
Yes, I think that I think that we need to mention a couple of things. First of all, that it was the folklore around it was that she ferociously guarded the park and kept people away, because just locate it. It's right in the middle of the city of Accra. Ralph can probably talk about the way where it is on the central artery of the city. But it is she was known to be somebody that could not be approached on that park. Because she would not allow, you know, people wanted to build casinos and I don't know what else, and she just wouldn't, you know, give way for that. Also, it was a program, again, there's this whole business of space and programs. And what we understand is, you know, happened was that there were mobile libraries. There's a, you know, there were mobile science laboratories. There was a drama program for children, and the current, just as an example, the current chair of the National Theatre of Ghana, Nana Fredria Oforiata, is, you know, just remembers so much how his childhood was impacted by being part of the group of children that went to the drama studio and went to the park. And therefore, there's a community of people who are like him and who believe that that park should be safeguarded. So I just wanted to make that point.
No, that's very important. And I think the thing is, the blueprint is there. The memories are there. That is to say, you know, like Panifest, the blueprint is there. Things might take longer, they might stop and start, but the fact that the park is there and it's called Efua Sutherland Children's Park, there is time and space for the vision to grow again. If the park had disappeared, the memory would be gone, and maybe even the passion and impetus to transform it into what was the original vision. You know, that's you know, that's
it happened in, it certainly happened in Kumasi when we talk about urban spaces, because the Kumasi version of this park it's in miserable, you know, everything is overgrown and so on and so forth. It's really a miserable thing, but maybe we can get to those things, those thoughts later. Ralph, we need you. We need to talk about this whole the place of this park.
Yeah, well, I think if we think of the park as an urban courtyard, that in the same way in which we grew up in spaces where courtyards played a function, we need to learn the sophistication of what a courtyard is. If I were to illustrate, as an architect, a lot of clients will ask us, I want a terrace on the first floor. I want balconies around all the houses. And 10 years later, they've never used those balconies or terraces because they were built as a mental vision of what ought to be on a house, and they were not designed to be used or intended to be used. I think that happens with open spaces in our cities, that we do not design them for use. And the picture Mark gave about developing programs within the park is one of the key things for making a difference for their survival and being valued in our country. They are important climatological assets to any urban environment, but they are also important sociologically, educationally, and for leisure and recreation as well. And the level of sophistication applied in how we plan to make them usable will ensure a better life for them. So things like the buses that were placed here with science equipment to take education facilities out of town to help other communities that did not have that facility brought a certain life and meaning to this place. Rachel, if you can show the next picture, I'll throw out an idea that we've been working on in our office. My wife is also an architect, so she's been very much involved in developing some of these thoughts. Rachel, the one about the synergy. But the idea here is that if you look at the park as a courtyard in the city, then you've got to design a life for it. And one of the natural, it's almost too big to overlook, is that the National Theatre and the National Children's Park should be linked. They have a natural synergy that needs to be exploited. And in this picture, we show the National Theatre is on the right. We've created, is it jumping, Rachel? We've created a bridge across the road. And on the left side would be a big amphitheater. This means that programs on either side can be interlinked and spill over. And one of the thoughts we are throwing out is, why not have a National Children's Festival? So at that time, there's a whole plethora of creative and artistic stimulation for children to develop. I want to start on the way on one end, National Children's Robotic Festival. Then there's stool furniture as a street art in Ghana. And there are ideas for selling only Ghana-made goods on top of this platform and around it. And build, the theme we developed was national identity, national self-esteem and the city. That when you don't build art and the value of civic things into a society, and you degrade it only for selling, buying, selling, finance, commerce, and the like, the city loses its soul. And you need to use spaces like this and develop even more so that they're not isolated. But by densifying the ministries, for instance, raising them up and organizing them into a modern government machine of administration, you could also free up a lot of ground space and green it and link it up so that you have walkways and tree development, improve the environmental sustainability of the city, and make it a place where every Ghanaian will want to walk. We actually found that there are 21 national monuments in the triangle between the Kwame Nkrumah Mausoleum, coming up to the AU Monument, going round again past the Parliament House to the stadium and the Osu Castle. And we were shocked that there are 21 uncelebrated, uncoordinated buildings and monuments of national worth. If we could join them together in a pedestrian walk through the city with parklands between them, the amount of revenue that could be gained, plus the building of an identity of good pride that this is whom we are as a people, and it's worth seeing, and build children up who, bringing it back to Ma's desire was that the park should be preserved for the future of this nation, which is its children. That forever and ever, they should know that there's one place downtown devoted to giving us vision for our future. And I believe that can be achieved.
Ralph, I think that's such a wonderful, wonderful idea and observation. And, just you putting it out there that there are 21 spaces that could be linked by a walkway, I think is a good place to start. I mean, I can't, I think at least you've inspired me to think of, okay, so what's the next step? How do we get this done? Give me the map. Let's mark it out. Let's see what the walkway, let's visualize it. And then let's start going around to the people who could help make it happen. Because these things are possible, even in impossible cities, even in impossible cities. So, you've actually jumped ahead to where we were going to end. So can I just pull us back just a little to because I want to hear from the grandchildren and talk a little bit about how your grandmother's legacy has inspired and informed your work before we then go forward to ending on what would a new Accra look like, because you are the new Accra. So talk to us about your visions. We were saying earlier, we begin with where we are and move forward. And you talked about the home and what it has done, what it meant for you. So share with us where that beginning has led you, and then we can, I guess, all end with the future, because you are the future.
Elizabeth, if you don't mind, I will take this one and start, and then I'll pass it on to you. But so the image that you're looking at right now is an aerial view of a portion of Araba Mansa, which is the name. Is this our great or our great grandmother's name?
Great.
Our great grandmother's name, which is a name that has also been given to the land where this family home was built, where the writing studio was built, and that, as you can see, has remained this pretty extraordinary green oasis in what is increasingly the heart of Accra as the city has grown around and beyond that property. And if you look very closely, you'll see a few little colorful tiles, you'll see tires, you'll see an interesting yellow structure there. And that is because this space has been dedicated as a play and urban design lab of sorts in the city. So we saw this slide, the Playtime in Africa book, which is a photo essay that Nana created in collaboration with the photographer Willis Bell. And it's an exploration of the significance of play in Ghanaian culture, published in the early 1960s. So clearly, since the Conscious Cities Festival theme last year was around the family-friendly city, and we're talking in 2019, this is 50 years ahead of its time in terms of the public discourse on play and its importance in space. And we took this idea of playtime in Africa and brought it actually onto this property, and for the past 10 years have really been iterating in terms of design and experimentation for what makes a child-friendly city. What are the design principles that make a city navigable for children and their families? What makes design inclusive? How do we take advantage of the natural resources that already exist in the city and preserve them and restore them and expand upon them? So if you look at this space, and if you were to look at an aerial map of Accra, you would definitely see that this is very unusual. It's almost unique in the city as a whole. And this, for me, is really the physical manifestation of that inspiration. We've spoken so much about how Nana's work traversed these ideas of the importance and the significance of the child as a citizen and as an urban dweller. We've talked about her love of nature and her intention with cultivating, literally with her own hands, the natural environment, and ensuring that her home was surrounded by this extraordinary natural beauty, and wanting that, again, for other Accra residents. We've obviously seen her extraordinary and fundamental influence as a cultural placemaker in creating some of these iconic and foundational spaces that have given rise to so much more of what we see now as Ghanaian culture, on the stage and at the university. And for me, this space is the precise intersection of those three themes. We named children, nature, and culture as part of our theme for this year's festival, precisely for this reason. And I am really excited to see what the future of this space will be, to see what kinds of experiments we can continue to develop here, and to see how the best practices that are developed here can be replicated and expanded throughout Accra and throughout other Ghanaian cities as well.
Wonderful. All right, Rachel.
So it's Elizabeth now.
Sorry, Elizabeth. I'm sorry.
You're going to happen at least once.
Elizabeth. My apologies. And Elizabeth, you might have the last word.
Yeah, so obviously, again, I'm in theater, so that's another very obvious overlap. But I think speaking even broadly, something I've always been interested in is space making, hyperlocality, like really focusing in on a place and its features and what that tells you about the culture of the place and the people of the place, and what that means for broader connections as humans, especially in terms of developing identity. So getting to know a lot more of her written work now, as outside of the plays that you read the Edufa and you read the Marriage Bonanza and you heard about Furiwa, but getting to actually read her notes on, Auntie was showing me just the other day, just how much she would scramble down, because when you start working on these, in these areas, you see how much everything is connected, how important space is to nature and vice versa, how important nature is to people. And I think it just reveals a very human-centered practice. And that's something that I know personally that I aspire to in my work. So looking at documentation, Auntie C has spoken about, and Auntie Amawi have spoken about how she would record people in her spaces. So gathering information, but also disseminating it out. My work, the photos that are up right now are of Accra Theatre Workshop, a dance class that we had students from Ghanaian universities and students from the US come and do an exchange program at my space Terra Alta, which is another portion of the land, the Araba Mansa property. Building a theater space from shipping containers, which is in the top right space, because again, you know, we don't have, if you look at the infrastructure and you look at the needs of the artists now, a lot of what the solutions or the proposals that people are making on a broad level, you have this big national theater building. It's not actually what most people need in terms of making a sustainable living as an artist, making, even reaching kind of the communities that some people are interested in. And I think just taking those steps back to look at education and children and culture, and as people grow up, what kind of spaces do they find themselves in? How do we be Ghanaian now? You know, how do we be together now? How do we express that identity, whether it's through dance or it's through storytelling or community efforts? What does that look like? I think that's something I'm finding more and more that resonates with me a lot about from her practice.
You know, what inspires me listening, especially to the two of you speak, is that passion you have, but the clarity that you both have of bridging the past to the future, you know, for which I thank you. We are sort of, I'm very conscious of the fact that I've been a bad moderator and we're well out of time. So I do want to make sure though that Amawi, who brought us together, kind of has a chance to address how come she, you know, her aspirations, I guess, for this program and how she thinks we've met it. And then to go back to where we started with Sister Essie, who, you know, in your final comments can please remind us all of the journey we've taken and what we may have forgotten and what we need to make sure we remember as we go forward. And that everybody will therefore listen to this program and be very happy with the past, but also be inspired to think of what we can each do to move forward. So this is by way of, you know, what is this? 3 words of last round.
Thank you, Abby. I would just very quickly say that I think that all the webinars, and this one in particular, has met the goal that Rachel and I, as the primary co-conveners, had, along with Mmofra Foundation, of having conversations about people who are actually on the ground practicing and thinking about these things, and identifying them and giving them an opportunity to talk about things that in a very kind of intimate, you know, way. There are not many forums that, you know, do this. So I believe that we have achieved that. And if there are some last remarks that, you know, other people want to give, then we can close out the session.
I mean, I think that what we there's something that you said that I want to take off on, and that all of this work we've talked about has been lifelong, intergenerationally long. It's, you know, like keeping your eye on the ball all the time for decades. I mean, so it's a lot of work. and I mean, we're still now we're part of what we're trying to do with regard to Panafest and making Ghana more aware of the fact that she's actually the center of the Pan-African world in many ways. And Accra has three important Pan-Africanists: Kwame Nkrumah, W.B. Du Bois, and now why is it what my mind is, and George Padmore, buried in the city, and that we should try and live up to to who we are as the center. And it's always having to remind people and to get people to raise awareness. So there's this question of consciousness, and this conscious city thing is very important to us in Accra, and in all that Efua Sutherland tried to do and what we are trying to do. So I just want to make the point that it's a battle that has to be fought. And people, there's still a whole lot of awareness to be created around all the areas, whether it's the environment, whether it is how we build up our cities, whether it's how we look forward to children, whether it is it is the arts or whatever. I mean, or our place in the world. There's so much to be done. I mean, that's really what I see sitting at the head of, and having, having had, I don't know how I got myself into being, having inherited, the position of being at the helm of affairs of many of the things that she started. And it's a lot of work. I mean, I mean, it's fantastic and it's wonderful, but it's a lot of work. Yeah.
Well, my dear, the firstborn traditionally gets the double portion, so there you are. But, the five of you have reminded us of how much is to be done, but you've also put out there things that we can maybe try and follow through on. Next year is a Panafest year, and, you are Panafest. Let's be intentional about taking the lessons of Accra as a conscious city into Panafest somehow, or if not into Panafest, as you know, the Pan-African World Heritage Museum is thinking of launching something which let's take all the people who come to that on our Efua Sutherland walking tour. I mean, let's begin small. We've thrown out a number of ideas that we can try and build on, pilot program, interest somebody to build towards the future. I'm a great believer in starting in small steps where we are, and it doesn't matter how long the next step comes, so long as we don't lose the vision. And one of the things that you have all been conscious of, space and programming, and the space is there. Let's keep the vision of the programming and find a way to build it. I'm so impressed by what you have done so far, even creating this series of programs between you. And I think you've given us inspiration. Your mother has laid the blueprints. Let's do what we can and follow through. And, on behalf of everybody who's listened to all 4 programs, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you.